Okay, this is a summary of the conclusion of the Maimer on Daf Mem Hey, where the Alter Rebbe starts to talk about the level of Chachmi law that is brought down into the Olamais. And we described that Hashem is Ein Sof, and therefore, in order for there to be any form of comprehension, there's going to be infinite forms of comprehension, because Hashem is Ein Sof. As it becomes expressed, it becomes bifurcated and trifurcated and essentially infinitely separated out. We use the mashal of hairs on the head that draw their nourishment from the brain, yet do not have any of the sensitivity of the brain, as evidenced by the fact that you cut your hair and there's no pain to it. In a similar manner, Hashem expresses himself in infinite form. And this is what we emphasize about the techelis of the tzitzis. And we talked about how the techelis, the blue, is representative of where the flame touches the wick, the foreign object that becomes burned within the flame. Similarly, when the infinity of Hashem touches the finity of this world, it creates this level of the blue flame. And this is what the Meraglim alluded to, although they didn't understand it consciously when they said that it's a land that consumes its inhabitants. They meant it as a negative, like a foreign object coming in contact with the antagonistic entity of the flame, in contrast to the way it is in MS, that it is congruent with the flame, and that therefore the Jews who are attached to Hashem, which that's what gives them their sustenance, and therefore Chaim Kulchem Hayoin, so we become eaten, subsumed within the infinity of Hashem. So the Meraglim saw this as a negative, because they are in conflict with the infinity of Hashem, and therefore they become consumed. And Torah Kedusha sees that as a positive, that we become completely subsumed within the infinity of Hashem. The Alter Rebbe then talked about the message that it reminds us that we shouldn't follow after our hearts. Asher atem zonim, and it uses the mashal of the zona who deviates from her husband, that when a person is in pursuit of physical pleasures of this world, that takes them away from the fiery pleasures of Hashem. That a woman is Isha, she has a fire, Eish, for Hashem. She longs for her husband. She longs to be close with God. And if she deviates like the Saita and is unfaithful to her husband by having a passion for something other than godliness, this negates her capacity to have that passion for godliness. Then on Daf Beis, there is a beer on the pasuk when it talks about the idea of the tchelis, and it describes again the various colors in a flame. And it reminds us that this message, that the blue of the flame is where the flame comes in contact with the wick. And in a healthy sense, that's total bittul, which is why we don't have tchelis now, because we don't have bittul be'etzem. We only can have bittul hayesh, where there's the conflict between the flame and the fuel. And that's why we don't have it now. And we use the analogy that the wick is taken from wool. Wool is like the hair, that is a very mild representation of the full-on intensity. And we talked about the difference between the various stages of awareness of the malachim and the neshamas, because as the infinite starts to become orderly through the characteristic of das and manifests itself in the world, you're going to have this variety of levels of understanding. And this is what we are able to achieve through the 248 limbs, the 248 mitzvahs, which the Alter Rebbe took us through a gematria. We create total alignment rather than conflict. And therefore we become subsumed in a godly way rather than devoured.